And we are back one more time for another episode of
The Horror Guys.
Yay! I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
It's getting more Muppet Showy every time, isn't it?
It is, yeah. A little bit. We got some horror movies in a short.
None of which involve Muppets.
And a book mention this week, too.
And a book mention, yes.
Yeah.
Not one of ours this time.
No, but although I bet we'll mention ours.
You mean those books that you could find at horrorguysbooks.com?
Yeah, those books.
Many good books. The latest issue number 29 of Horror Bulletin Monthly, has hit the shelves as of yesterday.
Ooh.
Pick that up at paperback at lulu.com or amazon.com. Ebooks at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Hulu, Tolino, Smashwords, and 5 or 6 foreign places that I can't remember right now.
And the cover is especially cool this month, too.
And also at brianshell.com.
Uh-huh.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the cover. Who did the cover?
Our nephew, Alex.
Alex Shell did a very nice little Boris Karloff takeoff.
There is a nephew who is learning how to be a graphic artist, writer, artisan. And we had got some cover work.
We did, yes. Yeah. All right, well, anyway, but believe it or not, we're here today to talk about
horror movies.
We're going to start out with the very recent Trunkâ, Locked In, just from this week. I believe that one's on Amazon Prime if you want to go take a look at it.
Check it out.
We'll also talk about the awesome Wolf Creek from 2005. It's a werewolf movie, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
There's no actual wolves in this movie.
No, it's just a name.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we'll watch a short film, and then we'll get into The Curse of the Undead from way back in 1959. Sounds cooler than it is.
Yeah, it is.
And then we'll hit off Ghost Month. Yes, February is going to be Ghost Month. The entire month of ghosts and haunted houses.
Ghostly things.
Ghostly films. We're going to start out with Hell House LLC II, the Abbadon Hotel. Not to be confused with House LLC II. We need a longer title. Mm-hmm. That's a different movie entirely.
Right.
That one's from 2018. We're also going to look at a brand new book, Flesh Communion and Other Stories, that Kevin read this week. And that's it for the podcast.
Couple of bonus films.
Got a couple of bonus films. If you go to horrorbulletin.com, you can read about The Cave from 2005. Sort of like Alien meets The Descent.
Uh-huh.
With all the quality removed.
Well, okay, not all the quality.
You liked it better than I did.
I did. I liked this one. Yeah, quite a bit.
You have better patience than I do for some things.
Yeah. And an old one, an oldie called The Phantom Creeps, which is actually
1939 Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, and what they did with the short serials that they used to show with movies.
It was like a 6-hour serial or 4-hour serial
plus,
or something like that.
And they cut it down to less than an hour and a half, isn't it?
They cut out all the boring parts and made an hour-and-a-half movie out of it.
But boy, it is frenetic.
It is.
They just go
they
from
cut out
one
all the slow
madcap
bits.
thing to another. These mad scientists and science and robots and terrorist attacks and it just
you
boom,
will be
boom,
exhausted
boom.
by the time you're finished watching this thing.
Yeah.
Movies need the slow bits sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Anyway, I think the whole movie, the hour-and-a-half version of that is available on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
If you check out our review, there'll be a link to it wherever that was.
It was pretty cool, but frenetic, I think is a good word for it.
Yeah, there's just way too much going on in that. It's an hour-and-a-half worth of action in an hour-and-a-half movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to start off with Trunkâ, Locked In from 2024. Written and directed by Mark Scheisser. Stars Sina Martins, Louise Helm, Artjum Gills, and Charles Reddinghouse. Hour and 36 minutes. And
there's a trailer in the
This was
shows.
advertised, or maybe the German title was just plain old Trunk. So, yeah, if you're going to watch it on Amazon Prime, which if you got Amazon Prime, it's there and it's free.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Trunkâ-Locked In. Spoiler-free, for a movie with a very small cast that mostly takes place in a small enclosed space, it's about a woman locked in the trunk of a car.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually very entertaining. Sina Martins is excellent as Melina, trying to figure out and deal with her situation. We both highly recommend it.
Yeah, this was cool.
Yeah. The trailer, I mean, a woman gets locked in a trunk and then she calls the police and asks for help, and there's bumpy roads and there's sound effects, and you've seen it all before. But this was
It's
actually
totally
very
worth the watch.
good. Yes, it
Yeah, it
doesn't
was.
necessarily go where you think it might.
It's not at all boring. Yeah.
What happens?
Well-
Don't spoil it to death, though.
Melina wakes up in the trunk of a car as it begins to rain, and the trunk is actually open. Well, there's something wrong with her legs, and she sees a bag of her stuff on the ground outside, her clothes and stuff. Well, she digs in the bag for her phone as a man approaches, and then she fakes being unconscious. And when he arrives, he throws her bag in the dumpster and shuts the trunk. And credits roll.
That's not good when they don't take your stuff with you.
Yeah, but she's got the phone. Well, as the car drives off with her in the trunk, she calls her boyfriend, Enno. But she only gets his voicemail.
We get a flashback at this point that shows her and Enno in a park taking pictures of themselves, and somebody whacks Enno over the head, and then she goes black. Mm-hmm. So chances are he's dead, too.
Yeah. Well, the bad thing is she notices Enno's hat in the trunk with her. So maybe he's not going to answer the phone ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Well, her sister Mona calls to jabber about some nonsense, but she won't shut up long enough to hear what Melina's got to say.
Shut up, I'm kidnapped already.
Yeah, and then she thinks it's a joke and hangs up on her. And then Melina loses signal, and her battery is at 76%.
That seems reasonably good.
Yeah. Well, she watches a video on her phone that shows them preparing to hitchhike to Frankfurt, and then it shows them being abducted.
Okay, that's the video with Enno.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Mona sends her a web page about how to get out of a trunk.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, thinking it's still a joke. Well, Melina actually looks at the things on the website and tries them. There's things like, try to, look for an emergency release and so forth. And
I guess the car is old enough it doesn't have one.
yeah, and probably the people preparing this trunk
Or
thought
took
of
it
these
off,
things
yeah.
too. Yeah, none of these things work. Well, Melina gets through to emergency services, but they can only see what cell tower her call is going through, not her location. And in the middle of that call, Melina's father calls, ranting about them leaving town without telling him. And
Nobody ever lets her talk.
yeah, he also won't shut up and listen. He'll say, Dad, I'm in the trunk. Yeah. Well, she finally gets him to believe her, but he won't call the police. He wants to know about ransom, but they aren't after that.
About this time, I'm thinking Melina's dad's in the mob or something.
Yeah,
He
it
doesn't want the
seemed
police
fishy.
awfully bad.
Yeah. Well, about that time, she notices that she's got a big cut on her side, and it's still bleeding. Staple stitches have popped open, and she thinks they've taken her kidney.
She's a doctor, by the way.
Yeah, she's got medical training, and so she vomits and passes out for a while. And then, using what she has on hand in the trunk, she works to sew her wound closed. And that was pretty graphic and realistic. Well, she hears the man in front telling her something, telling someone on the phone that we'll be there in an hour and you can have what's left of her. Our phone is at 60%.
But our review is now over. That's a good place to stop.
Yeah, we're not going to spoil it more because more stuff does happen.
Lots more stuff
A surprising
happens, yes.
amount of stuff happens for her just hanging out in a trunk.
Yeah, that was fun in a tense kind of way.
Yeah.
It's very well filmed, almost entirely inside a trunk, and it's all close-ups, mostly in the dark. Still, it works really well. Regardless of all that, it does seem like an awfully big trunk for a European car.
Nice and roomy.
They get their little mini tiny cars over there, gas efficiency.
No,
and,
she had plenty of room to be in
boy,
there
the
and
trunk is
move
bigger
around.
than my backyard.
Okay, not that big, but it was roomy. Yeah.
It's very tense. Even though there's almost zero action, it never gets boring and keeps us guessing as the mystery plays out.
Yeah, who's behind this?
We only see three characters and hear a couple others on the phone, so it's got a tiny cast and probably a really low budget, but it works really well.
Yeah, it did.
Now, let me mention the low budget as a compliment here. It does not look low budget at all.
No, yeah. Well, they, with a limited set like that, you can put it all into the one place.
I shot my movie in the trunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, another one that was not shot in a trunk, at least not all of it, was shot in Australia, by the way, or New Zealand or one of them places.
Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
2005's Wolf Creek. Written and directed by Greg McLean. Stars Nathan Phillips, Cassandra McGrath, Kesty Morassi, and Nathan Phillips. An hour and 39 minutes.
Nathan Phillips is there twice as starring.
We liked him a lot.
I think. Did you mean to put the other guy's name?
I meant to put the main villain's name in there. I don't think he shows up.
Whoops. Okay.
John Jarrett.
Okay.
It's right there in the spoiler-free.
Yeah.
Yeah, the spoiler-free judgment says, the casting of Mick is perfect. He's the bad guy. John Jarrett really looks and sounds the part. He's like Crocodile Dundee in the Mirror Universe. He's evil.
The evil version, yeah.
But he's still funny.
Kinda, yeah.
The other cast are fine as well. The story doesn't have a lot of surprises. You know where this is going right away. But it's gritty and realistic. It flowed well, and it entertained overall. What'd you think?
I liked it.
I liked it, yeah.
I did.
I liked it a lot better the first time I saw it. I didn't know how it was going to end.
Uh-huh.
This was the second time I've seen it, and it's still very, very good.
Yeah, it was.
It's not as good on the second time through, though.
Well, kind of spoiled, yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, you might want to just put us on pause.
Yeah, and go watch it.
I believe this one was on Tubi.
And then come back and watch. And
come back and
hear
watch
the rest of the podcast.
There's other Wolf Creek movies in the series that I have not seen.
And there's a series too.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Yeah, so, there's more to see here.
The 2005 movie started it all. Okay, so we are told that 30,000 people go missing in Australia every year. 90% are found within a month. The rest are never seen again.
UFOs.
I wonder what happens to those.
UFOs abduct them all.
Kangaroos.
Oh, the kangaroos are behind it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Kangaroos are actually aliens.
Well, that makes sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, we cut to a guy buying a used car. A couple of girls talk about him as they're planning a road trip to Wolf Creek with him soon. Liz, Christy, and Ben go out for drinks before leaving in the morning. They head off through the endless Australian desert as credits roll. Yeah, and I think that desert is endless there.
Mm-hmm.
They're all having a great time, and then Ben starts talking about UFO sightings. There are a lot of them in this area. They eventually come to Emu Creek, a last chance gas station kind of place. Some of the locals, including a guy named Baza, admire the girls inside. They're all rude to Ben, who doesn't appreciate it. You know, it's one of those look pretty girls in the country bar kind of scenes.
Yep.
Well, they finally come to Wolf Creek Crater Walking Trail. It's a huge meteorite crater that's miles across. They all notice their watches have stopped. Must be magnetism or something. They all finish up and get back to the car, but the engine is dead. Could that be related to what stopped the watches? Or could it be related to the UFO stories?
So it's going to be a movie about UFO abductions and aliens.
It's certainly looking that way.
But no.
They end up trying to sleep in the car. Eventually, a man in a big truck arrives. His name is Mick, and he looks at their engine, but he doesn't know how to fix it.
And he's a big friendly guy.
They all think he's funny, like Crocodile Dundee, and of course they actually say that.
Mm-hmm.
He offers to tow them to his place for the night and fix it in the morning. They agree to his offer, and Mick tows them to his place, way out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's a long tow.
You know, saying we are way out in the middle of nowhere in the Australian desert is like times 10.
Yeah, scary.
Well, they stop at an old mining camp where Mick is staying. They all sit around a campfire as Mick talks about killing animals for a living. Ben makes a Crocodile Dundee joke, but Mick doesn't seem to get it. He laughs, and it's not quite clear what he's laughing at. He's very Aussie.
Yes, he is.
He laughs at everything.
Uh-huh.
He's
got a distinct laugh, too.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Yeah. It's kind
halfway between a supervillain and Renfield.
Yeah, uh-huh. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
They all turn in for the night. Can't stop.
Well,
Liz wakes up tight in a room. She finds some broken glass and gets to work on her zip ties. She gets free and investigates outside. Mick has completely disassembled their car's engine. Little pieces everywhere.
yeah, they're not going anywhere in that.
She hears Mick inside the building torturing Christy. Well, Liz starts a fire as a distraction and rushes inside to let Christy go. She hides as Mick comes back inside and pulls a gun on the man. He yells, and she shoots him. She doesn't know how to reload the gun, so she just whacks him on the head a few times before releasing Christy. They plan to take Mick's truck, but they've run out and left him inside with the keys in his pocket.
Whoops.
Well, of course, Mick's not dead. He comes out with a shotgun, and they try to ram him before driving away. They don't really know where they are or where they're going, but they get away in the truck. They stop at the edge of a cliff and push the truck over the side, hoping that Mick will think they've all died. You're dead, go away.
Mm-hmm. It's worth a
Well,
try.
Mick does drive up in another car and sees the truck far below. Liz runs back to the camp to look for more cars or maybe release Ben. she finds many newspaper clippings about missing people in the area. Mick has done this many times before. She also finds and loads another gun, and she finds a whole pit full of bones and a garage full of cars.
He's been at this a while.
She finally gets in a car and starts it, but then Mick stabs her from behind. Turns out Mick did understand the Crocodile Dundee "this is a knife" reference.
Yep.
He's got a big one.
He does.
He then severs her spine so she can't even try to escape again. Well, the sun comes up and Christy goes looking for Liz. She makes it to a road and starts running. She flags down a passing car driven by an old man.
She's saved at last.
A shot rings out and the old man falls over dead.
Whoops.
Mick did brag earlier about being a sharpshooter. He wasn't lying.
No.
Before long, he shoots her as well. Mick then loads all the bodies in the trunk of a car and sets it afire. Meanwhile, Ben wakes up, tied up somewhere with barking dogs, and there's a very dead man tied up nearby. He gets loose and starts walking through the desert. Eventually, some German tourists find him and pick him up. They take him to town where he's loaded onto a plane and flown to a hospital. He's later arrested for the murder of the 2 girls. 4 months later, he was cleared, but in the meantime, Mick has disappeared.
He's out there somewhere.
He's in the house.
Maybe.
It starts out hinting that it's going to be a UFO story, but then it goes a whole different direction. If you watch the trailer, you'll know which way it's going.
Mm-hmm.
Mick has this hilarious evil villain laugh. It's more of a nervous giggle, actually, but it is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Mick's character is 50% evil Aussie and 50% that laugh. It's very dirty, gritty, and intense once the action starts, and you expect one of the young women to survive. You know, there's always a final girl. But no, because Mick is very good at what he does, and he's a lot of fun watching him doing it.
And he has fun with it.
Ben survives only because Mick allowed it.
Yeah, I think so.
If you like the kidnap torture stories, this one is really one of the best because it's a kidnap torture murder story that's funny, too.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to see a short film?
Yeah.
How to Make a Ghost, 2024. Written and directed by...
Fitting in with our ghost theme.
Ghost theme. This was Friday's movie, which Friday was the 2nd, so February is Ghost Month.
Uh-huh.
Written and directed by Jared Hogan. Stars Damian Young, Samuel Gorgon, Jordan Duffy, and Jaden Fontaine. 12 minutes, 44 seconds. Trailer in the show notes will link you right to it on YouTube. Tell us about it.
Well, it's Halloween, and 3 kids are talking about horror movies while sitting in the gas station parking lot. One kid watches a car park and watches as the driver leaves the back door open. Goes inside, leaves the car all unlocked. He dares another kid to get into the car's back seat and scare the owner when they come back.
Okay.
Well, he doesn't scare him when he comes back. The driver gets in, the car pulls out, and the kid's in the back. Well, the driver is listening to a scary story about a cemetery, and the kid in the back seat is wearing a ghost costume. The kid waits for just the right time to jump up, and it goes badly for all involved.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't get... It goes... You fool around and you find out, right?
Yeah, they did.
Well, there are some cool shots here, and the story idea was very well executed. I didn't care for the bright flashes of red when something happens.
That was kind of cool, actually. I thought.
It's like those old movies that would flash red before someone dies.
That's what it reminded me of, yeah.
Except
kind of a homage to those.
Okay, maybe.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's not bad in itself, but I'm not even sure who becomes a ghost in this because we never actually see the ghost.
Or don't we?
I don't know.
It's a little disappointing, or is it?
It was.
Okay. Well, it left me wanting more. But the more I thought about it afterwards,
I would like to have seen more. I think that's the problem.
But then I was thinking about it afterwards, and I was thinking, yeah, that was actually kind of clever. And well done. Well made, anyway. You'll have to watch it and see and decide for yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that takes us to one of our rare book reports.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been listening to a bunch of horror audiobooks. I really need to write up reviews of those soon.
Yeah, you should.
I never do. I should, though.
Well, this was an author that was looking for reviewers, and I said, hey, I would like to read this book. because I thought it sounded interesting. So they were kind enough to provide me a review copy, and I
Written
did.
by Holly Ray Garcia, 263 pages, and there is a link to take you to buy it at Amazon.
This is Flesh Communion and Other Stories.
Ooh, that sounds tasty.
And the cover is even cool. It's a bunch of short stories crammed into this little book, and some of them are really, really short. She's good at getting right to the point, which I think works for the length of
No
some
12-page descriptions of a tree?
No,
Okay.
yeah. And all over the place as far as the topics. I mean, you start the story, and there's not a theme. You know, like a lot of theme books will have.
They're not zombie
werewolves
tales.
or zombies. Well, this might have a zombie, and this one's got a werewolf, and this one's got a ghost. This one's got an apocalypse. And then, it just hops all over. Very impressive how it does it. I could read my review.
You should.
Read the actual review that I wrote. Well, as the author says, this is a book featuring 26 tales of desperation, sorrow, and terror. And many of the stories are downright chilling. There is a little dark humor tucked around the edges as well. The writing is skillful, usually getting right to the point, which allows many of the stories to be very short. You get pulled along so well that when some of them end, you're left wanting more, in a good way. And you never know what the next story is going to spring on you. Maybe a nightmare cult, that's the title story. Maybe a taste of an apocalypse, a werewolf, a ghost, or an octosquatch.
A what?
Yeah, I'll let you imagine what that is. It might also be a little slice of life from an ordinary person that's just really poignant, gives your heart a little squeeze. I mean, a couple of them are like, oh, that grabbed me. Oh. Well, two of my personal favorites. There's The Many Indiscretions of Agent 592. And it's like a cloak and dagger kind of story, but it's told entirely in emails, which I thought was a hoot. And there's one called The Finest French Lace, which is just multiple levels of dread. It's just, yeah, that was, ooh. And the title story is also very unsettling. The variety of these stories and situations is impressive. There's plenty of gore and horror and adult language, which I was just fine with. I would highly recommend it for fans of short horror stories.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Get that at Amazon. There's a link in the show notes.
Yes.
Hey, while you're on Amazon, I know where you can get another horror anthology.
Yeah. Tales to Make You Shiver.
Yeah,
Volume
there's two
1
of them.
and Volume 2.
By us.
And that same token, there's no main theme there.
Nope.
There's ghosts and
miscellaneous
zombies
horror stories, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you get those at Amazon. Or again, over, like we said earlier, horrorguysshop.com has links for that too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one though, Flesh Communion and Other Stories.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was.
All right, takes us up to our next movie, which is a ghost story.
House LLC II, the Abbadon Hotel, from 2018, which was directed and written by Stephen Cognetti, stars Vasily, Gillian Gertz, Joy Schatz, and Dusty Austin. Runtime is 1 hour and 29 minutes, and there's a trailer in the show notes.
Spoiler free, what happens?
Well, if you liked the previous work in the series, this is kind of more of the same. It's still skillfully done. This one has a little bit too much talk and exposition, we thought. It drags a little bit, and then the climax is kind of, instead of a burst, it's kind of a fizzy release, if that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, we didn't hate it, but we didn't think it was as enjoyable as the first time around. But like I said, if you like the first one, bet you'll like this one.
Well, we watched the first one now officially, and then we watched this one, which is the newest one. There's like two in the middle that we haven't seen yet.
Uh-huh.
I'm not looking forward to them, actually.
Don't know.
I thought the first one was okay.
Okay, I think
found footage just doesn't excite me.
I liked the first one, I think, better than you did too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the lack of soundtrack probably bores me more than it should.
You like your music.
I watch a movie, I don't even notice the music unless it really stands out.
But it's there.
But if there's none, I notice that too.
It's noticeable. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, we are told that footage we're about to see was collected over a period of 2 years. Wendy is being interviewed about Jackson Mallet, who went missing at the Abbadon Hotel back in the first film. He'd been getting text messages that came from inside the hotel. And we watch old footage of Jackson, lost in the hotel 2 years ago. "They have no eyes," he repeats.
Oh, my.
We see black-robed figures in the background and strange piano music. We then cut to 1979 and a very young Jackson, like 4 years old, playing that same weird tune. He says, "The hotel opens in 2009. Tell everyone."
Well, okay.
That's a strange thing for a 5-year-old to say.
It is, yeah.
Well, then there's an interview show with Mitchell Kavanaugh, the only survivor of the incident 2 years ago. He made that documentary that we all saw. It's called The First Film. Well, there's a guy there who thinks it was just a fire that killed 15 people, but he refuses to explain why. The police swear that there's no danger at that hotel, but they still keep a police presence there at almost all times.
Well, that's suspicious.
We cut to a live streamer trespassing in the old hotel. He sees some things that he shouldn't. Back on the talk show, Mitchell defends his story against the ghost hunter and Arnold the politician. Yeah, they brought on a ghost hunter to talk about ghost hunting, and Arnold the politician is a local guy who works on the town council or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
On a different investigative show, my goodness, we're jumping around.
Kinda, yeah.
Jessica Fox, the investigator, talks to Mitchell. The hotel was based on H.H. Holmes' murder house, built to be maze-like inside. We hear about Patrick Carmichael, a member of Old Man Tully's cult who didn't die. She wants to go inside the old hotel and look inside that big freezer in the basement. Who could be in there? Jessica and Mitchell talk about taking Brock, the paranormal expert from the show, to the old hotel to investigate also. Molly goes along, but she's not happy about it. They leave her outside to watch for the police. We cut to a while later, and Jessica looks all beat up as she's interviewed by the police. She's been missing for 5 days.
So bad things happen to these people.
Back when they were all inside, Brock, Jessica, and Mitchell investigate the place. There are bloodstains and a real mess inside. They find the place where Andrew Tully and his followers killed themselves. They go into the basement and find the weird clowns. Everybody remembers the clowns.
Oh, yeah, they're memorable.
They look in the freezer, but there's no bodies in there. Brock then talks to the spirits with his Ouija board pointer, but they wake something up that they didn't expect to. She wanted to see inside the freezer. Why'd they bring a Ouija board?
You never know when you might need one. You should always take that with you.
Whip one out every time I go to parties.
Especially when going to haunted places.
Molly gets a call on the radio to come inside. David said he didn't call her, so she gets scared. They all see some weird stuff and make for the exit, but then they can't find it. Remember, it's built like a maze.
But it gets worse, too. It's like it shifts and changes on them.
And then the clown statues start showing up. There's no knob on the inside of the door, so they're trapped. And of course, all the windows are boarded up.
Mm-hmm.
They finally play the tapes from the basement, where some of the characters from the first film are arguing about Alex embezzling money. Maybe he could set up the Abbadon to make up all that money that he lost. The owner of the hotel offers to let Alex use it to give the place a second life. We don't see the owner of the hotel. In the modern group, Molly goes missing, and they find a note that says she's in the basement. The three head down there and find her along with the clown dolls.
Uh-oh.
Suddenly, the gate to hell blows open, and everyone runs and screams as the lights fade in and out.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah.
They can't get through the door, and there's more screaming as the clowns approach. We cut back to the talk show where the politician argues with Jessica about the local government's involvement in all this. It's fine. We're not covering anything up.
Mm-hmm.
Brock makes an agreement with Mitchell to go to the hotel. Since we've already seen him there, we know that it happened. Politician Arnold calls on the phone and says he's sorry he couldn't make it to the interview. Who was that guy on the show?
But that wasn't the politician Arnold then.
No, that was somebody else.
Who could it have been?
Well, we cut to the tapes where Mitchell confronts the politician Arnold, who turns out to really be Andrew Tully, the deceased cult leader. Aha! He says this is his hotel. He's got Alex and Mac from the first film with him. All I ever wanted was more guests, and you all came. His death was just the beginning. We never left. He then kills Molly as Jessica watches. Tully goes on and on and on and on and on, explaining his plans, saying that only one of them will be allowed to leave.
Okay, that was too many on and ons, but it did seem a little too long.
Too much talking, yes.
Yeah.
We got to make an hour and 37 minutes somehow. Mitchell turns out to sacrifice himself so that Jessica can escape. We then cut back to Jessica talking to the police. She claims not to remember any of it. Then we get a look at her face again, but maybe she didn't really escape all of it after all.
Ooh, maybe not.
Yep, this is still found footage. There are still clowns, and there are still people investigating. Just like the first one. There's just so much talking, sitting, and arguing. If you cut out the horror stuff, you'd have like 3 minutes of good.
Oh. Well, okay, more than 3 minutes. But
It goes from making no sense at all for the majority to Tully literally explaining everything. He explains way too much, actually. All the exposition gets a little draggy, and that's not supposed to happen right at the climax.
No, it isn't. No.
Meh.
Huh.
Didn't like it.
Okay. I'd still give it a thumbs up. Not a strong one, but yeah. I liked it more than disliked it, but yeah.
I thought it was boring. I gave it a mediocre thumbs down.
Oh,
a weak thumbs down.
Okay.
A Curse of the Undead from 1959. Directed by Edward Dean. Written by him and also Mildred Dean. Husband and wife undead writers.
Uh-huh.
I bet they were undead themselves.
Probably, yeah.
Written in 1959, they're probably just plain dead
That's
now.
how they were so good at it.
Stars Eric Fleming, Michael Pate, Kathleen Crowley. Hour and 37 minutes. Spoiler free. This was okay as far as horror films go, and okay as a Western. Yes, it's a Western horror film.
But it was the first Western horror film.
Oh, that is interesting.
So historically, it is relevant.
The first time the two had mixed.
Uh-huh.
They meshed the genres together pretty well. It's not a great Western. It's not a great horror film. Combining the two, though, it was a first. It was unique.
That made it better.
It makes it worth watching just for historical reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
If you like Westerns, if you like horror, you got to catch them all. What happens?
Well, we open on an old Western town. Dr. Carter and his wife ride into town on their wagon. He stops in to check on a patient, little Cora. He didn't think Cora would last the night. Preacher Dan says his prayers probably helped.
I'm sure that was all.
The other girl died last night, but the doctor can't find anything in his medical books. Well, they all go in, have breakfast, and as they prepare breakfast, the girl screams and dies. Huh. Well, as the doctor runs back into the room, something disturbed the window blind on the way out. Also, they find 2 small puncture wounds on Cora's neck.
Ooh, I know.
Mm-hmm. Well, when they arrive home, Carter's son, Tim, complains about the bully Buffer, who just beat him up. Buffer wants their farm. Carter goes to see Bill the sheriff. Bill says he'll take care of everything. Well, Buffer's men don't much care for what the sheriff has to tell them. This is a ultra-rich guy. He owns the town, basically, and the sheriff's kind of, limited here a little bit. Well, as Dr. Carter drives home, a man in black on a black horse watches him. Carter doesn't make it home. Tim immediately decides Buffer is behind the murder, and he punches Preacher Dan, and when Dan tries to stop him, he's going over to wreak his vengeance, and Preacher Dan tries to
He's going to blast
intervene.
the Buffer.
Yeah, and Preacher Dan says, no, and he gets punched. But, then Dan notices the dead doctor has puncture marks on his neck.
Oh, maybe he wasn't shot after all.
Like the girl. Yeah, no bullet wound. Yeah. At the funeral, we see the man in black crawl into Carter's coffin with Carter inside.
Well, now, that's cozy.
Yeah. Well, Charlie comes to tell Tim that Buffer has torn down the fence in the back of their property. Maybe he's taken over. Tim wants to go to town and take care of business with Buffer, and he doesn't want Charlie to accompany him. Buffer says he wanted the land, but he'd never hurt the town doctor. But Tim doesn't listen and insists on a gunfight. Well, that goes poorly. Buffer shoots Tim, and the sheriff can't do much about it because it was, it was self-defense. Tim drew on him. Well, Carter's daughter, Dolores, puts up a $100 reward for bringing in the murderer. Buffer laughs at the whole idea since he knows he's not the murderer. Still, Dora thinks he's the killer.
So wait, we're this time in the Old West,
Mm-hmm.
the big bully landowner, land stealer, bad guy
Yeah.
isn't the villain.
No,
He knows he didn't do it.
there's a darker force at work here. Yeah. The man in black watches from the shadows. He comes out and picks up one of the reward posters. He goes into the saloon and talks to the bartender. Buffer tells the man that the poster is about him. They have a tense standoff. Well, the man in black is Drake Roby, a gun for hire, and he shows up at Dolores's house for the job. Preacher Dan says he'll do everything in his power to stop him. Well, that night, Drake pays a visit to Dolores in her bedroom, and he pays special attention to her neck. Yeah. Preacher Dan insults and accuses Buffer as the sheriff watches. The three of them cook up a deal that may get Dolores to fire Drake. Meanwhile, Drake goes to the cemetery and sleeps in a coffin. Well, Dan goes to see Dolores, and she agrees that hiring Drake was a mistake. Except Drake comes in the morning. Well, they tell him to go away. Except that night, Drake comes back to Dolores. He says his eyes are really bad in the daylight, which limits his work opportunities. So he asks for a night job watching the fields, and she can, have her stuff protected from Buffer at night. Well, she agrees and says, yeah, she can fix things up with Preacher Dan, and she says he can stay in the cottage by the cemetery. Well, Dan searches for old Dr. Carter's will, but instead finds an old diary of Don Robles that talks about Drago Roby, who murdered his own brother. Drago killed himself over guilt, and not long after, a vampire started killing the young people in the village. There's also explanations in the book about how to kill a vampire. There's even an old photo of Drago, and you know what? He looks just like Drake.
And their names are surprisingly similar.
Names are so similar. Could they be?
No, that's just silly.
Well, that night, Drake visits Dolores again, but he loves her too much to drink any more of her blood. She comes out to him in a trance, and then the sheriff stops by and finds her sleepwalking. Well, they argue about Drake staying or leaving town. As the sheriff rides back to town, Drake kills him, drinks his blood. He's a thirsty guy.
This town's getting thinner by the day.
Yeah, it's not that big of a population to begin with. Yeah. Well, Drake comes to confront Dan, and Drake soon figures out what Dan knows. Dan calls Drake a monster, but he's a monster in love. Doesn't want to leave town, doesn't want to leave Dolores. They fight, but they are interrupted before Drake can finish off the preacher. Well, in the morning, Dan shows Dolores the diary, but she doesn't believe any of it. She's kind of smitten on Drake now. So they go looking for Drake in the daytime. Dan is pretty sure he knows where to look. They open up Drago Robles' tomb, and it's empty except for a silver dagger. He wants to look in Carter's coffin, but she won't allow it. He leaves, and she faints until Drake carries her home later. He might have had a little sip there, too.
Just a little sip.
Yeah, just a taste, yeah. Well, Drake brings Dolores a map that shows her ranch's old-time land boundaries, and it's good news. Drake goes to town and explains things to Buffer. Unsurprisingly, Buffer ends up dead. Drake goes after Dan, who is getting a court order to open the Carter's coffins. They have a shootout, and Drake falls down and turns to dust. See, Dan, knowing what Drake was, had carved a cross into his bullet.
Whoa, that's a neat trick.
Yeah.
One that I don't think I've ever seen done since.
Happy ending.
Well, this was the first time a vampire had appeared in a Western film. We see Drake up and about during the daytime, and he drinks whiskey, so he's not a normal vampire. Also, his victims don't seem to come back from the dead. They're just dead. Gotta wonder, though, couldn't Drake find a different place to sleep? He seemed really upset that Dan might get a court order to check out those coffins.
Mm-hmm.
And she said he could stay in the
cottage.
In the cottage, and he's not burns up in the daylight or anything. It would be safe enough.
It sure seems like it.
It's got a lot more of the Western elements than horror elements. But if you like Westerns, this is a must-watch. If you're just watching for the horror part, it's maybe a little skippable.
A little tame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not going to say boring, just kind of tame.
It was interesting. I'm glad I watched it.
I don't have any regrets.
No.
I'm not going to push it, though.
Right.
Over at horrorbulletin.com, you can also read our reviews of The Cave from 2005, directed by Bruce Hunt, stars Cole Hauser, Eddie Cibrian, Piper Perabo, and Lena Headley. Hour and 37 minutes. Spoiler-free what happens.
Well, it's entertaining in one of those don't think about it too deeply kind of ways. It's well made with a decent cast, the settings look good, and the visibility is good, especially, they're in
It's
caves.
all underground,
it's dark, and, they did a really nice job of lighting while still letting you know that they were in a cave. The special effects get the job done. They make a lot of bad choices that don't help a bad situation, but it's got more pluses than minuses overall.
Okay.
At least I thought so more than you, I think.
It wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
Considering it was stealing from Alien and Descent, two of the best horror movies ever, it couldn't have beat them. Also, we on there, if you want to read about a review from The Phantom Creeps from 1939. Stars Bela Lugosi, Robert Kent, Dorothy Arnold, and Edwin Stanley. Spoiler-free, the movie cut is reduced down from serials totaling over 4 hours, so there's a lot packed in. They cut out the dull parts and left almost too much action and jumping around from one thing to the other. It's nonstop fun with evil science, robots, action, chases, explosions, plots, and counterplots. One damn thing after another.
It is, yeah.
It's crazy. But it was also pretty good if you've got a lot of energy and it's not late at night. You ain't going to go to sleep on that one.
And it's Bela Lugosi being Bela Lugosi.
Yes, he was kind of always Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, he is.
Well, that's it for us this week. Stop in over at horrorbulletin.com, horrorguys.com, horrorguysshop.com, horrorguyspodcast.com. And we'll probably make up 2 or 3 more by next week at this rate.
We might.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
We'll see you next week.
See ya.
For Ghost Week. Yay!
Yay!